Hello, people. How are you? How are you? How are you? How are you? This is Phil, and sorry for being a little bit late, but unfortunately, my um, ability to watch the show was hampered on Sunday due to a few internet issues. So I watched it today. I watched it this afternoon, and then I watched it again tonight with my friend Renee. So I got to see this episode twice. And oh my goodness, this was the episode I had been waiting for. It's called I Am, and it focused on my favorite character so far in the entire series, which is Hyppolyta. I'm trying to figure out how to pronounce her name because I keep saying Hyppolyta, but apparently it's Hyppolyta. And I absolutely adored it. It was so out to left field, but which episode of this series hasn't been out to left field so far? So I guess it just goes with the territory. Total change of scenery from last week, and we appreciate it. What Lovecraft Country is turning to is a. And I shouldn't say turning into, because I think it just is. It's been this way since episode 3, I guess, because episode 1 and 2 set us up for what appeared to be this whole story set in that old mansion out in the middle of Lovecraft Country, and then it just took a left turn and said, no, we're not going to be that. We're going to be an anthology series that deals with all different aspects, all different genres of the sci fi, horror, mystery, fantasy, whatever genre. Pretty much every genre that blacks have not traditionally been in, and they definitely weren't in the 1950s. That's what we're doing. And I love it. Absolutely love it. And I had been waiting for the sci fi one because if anybody um, paid attention to the beginning of this series, I'm talking about like opening sequence, it kind of telegraphed that, right? Because it showed all those different genres kind of coexisting at once, including spaceships, and UFOs. So I'm like, okay, I can't wait to see these UFOs. And I actually had listened to a YouTuber a while back who was kind of angry because this is not Lovecraft. This is not Lovecraft. Uh, yeah, it's not really supposed to be about Lovecraft, guys. It's not the story of his life, nor is it related to any one of his specific works. It just uses him as a backdrop, as someone who was extremely influential in all these different genres, right? So a lot of these genres have taken from Lovecraft in some way or another. So in a way, we are living in a Lovecraft country when it comes to media and things of that nature. But it's the way that they present it is cool because it's not gonna stay connected to Lovecraft. It's kind of a tale of America from the eyes of these black people in the 1950s and what could be. I think I said this before in another edition of the podcast is imagine if we did have these sorts of um, these sorts of shows and stories back in the 1950s, right? But we didn't. So here we go. We can kind of live it vicariously through these characters in this kind of time warpy, trippy thing. But Hyppolyta has just been my favorite character. And I don't know, something about her and Diana. I hope that they bring about more with Diana because she's such a good little actress too. We saw that they were waiting for Bobo to come back, which I hear is Emmett Till, and there's going to be an episode that deals with what goes on there. Kind of curious as to where they're going to take it. If they're going to do like a Quentin Tarantino version of rewritten history or not, or if they're going to really deal with it historically. They have been doing it mostly historically for this series. So that might be a very dark episode if that does happen, and I don't know how they could tie it all in to make it interesting to the narrative, but they've been doing a pretty good job so far at uh, navigating that. But anyway, let's get to it because there's so much to break down on this episode. So much to break down. We had some Sun Ra in there, even. If anybody was with the show all the way to the end, the spoken word piece at the end was by Sun Ra, who's an Afrofuturist. He's kind of considered an Afrofuturist, and this episode deals with a lot of Afrofuture. You're not real. If you were, you'd have some status among the nations of the world. So we're both myths. Wonderful piece. And if you've never listened to Sun Ra, the Sun Ra Orchestra, do it. There's actually an NPR. Is it a Tiny Desk concert that they did? I don't know. They did something on NPR, which was really good. But he's got a lot of great albums, kind of free jazz, very, taking off from where John Coltrane started and maybe Pharoah Sanders, and then just taking it on that same road. But what happens is that Hippolyta, if we recall from the episode prior to last, was curious about what really happened to Uncle George. So she goes over to Chicago. Oh, it's Chicago. Sorry. She goes over to Arkham, and she discovers that what they were telling, what Atticus and Lita were saying happened to her husband is not what really happened. He didn't really get shot by the sheriff, and chances are he died in those ruins because she found the ruins of the old house. She found a little comic book there that his that their daughter made for them during the road trip. So she sets her mind to figuring out how to um, get that orrery, whatever that thing is, those planetary system things to open. And she does, and we have a real start of her adventure and showing that she's really smart, right? She's really not to be messed with. She, we had seen that in the beginning, but this episode really does its best to show that she's probably genius level, okay? And that becomes important because of the changes that she goes through in the episode. And in a way, I think it's a bit of a callback to what's her name now? Ugh, uh, Catherine. Mm. See, this is what happens when you think of something on the spot. But what is her name? Katherine Johnson. Yes, Katherine Johnson. The girls who worked at NASA at that time, the computers as they would call them, right? Because they did all the difficult calculations in their mind. So this was kind of a little bit of a look, there were many women probably who were capable of this. So I love how this show tackles sexism in the 1950s and even today. It doesn't shy away from that. Misha Green, right? She's the writer of this show. She's the head of this show, by the way. I saw a nice meme where some people try to give credit to Jordan Peele and even J.J. Abrams for the show. You can feel the J.J. Abrams touch. You can definitely feel the Jordan Peele touch. But this is her show. This is her story that she's telling them based on the book, but it's definitely a unique vision that she has. She's a very talented writer. So let's give credit where it's due. In this episode, just went full blown Hippolyta in showing that she had been the side character, but I guess that's what interested me about her is that she seemed like she had more to offer this story, and she was uh, a kind of step to the side, shoved to the side One, because of Uncle George, and two, because, we're following the young hot couple, Atticus and Lita. But Hippolyta just gave off this air of wisdom and of seniority. Obviously, she's older. That I thought would bring an interesting element to the episode. I didn't know it would go where it went, but thank God it did. Because when she is able to finally unlock this thing, she gets these coordinates, okay? Which lead her out to the middle of nowhere. I read an article where somebody put in the coordinates on Google Maps and it's somewhere out in the middle of Kansas. And when she arrives there, she's at this kind of a telescope viewing station, and she finds this kind of machine there that she is able to figure out how to unlock. And again, it kind of goes into this whole idea of, hey, she is a smart woman. She can do all these equations in her head, or I mean, she used a little notepad to help her, but she figured out how to get whatever that device was to work, including giving it a little smack. That always works. And when she does that, it opens up a portal to, in space time, and she falls into it. Before we get into what happens when she falls into it, let's just go into what's going on with the other characters, because I thought it was something very interesting that they did. One, they kind of just broke down Christina and Ruby's relationship. Christina showed her the bodies of the folks that she's been using to both change her into the white boy, whose name I always forget. Was it William? And the other lady who Ruby's been changing into. So she just breaks down how she's learned a whole lot of magic and she's been trying to get over on her father, which substantiates the theory that she used Atticus as bait to have her father killed. So there's a little bit of that revenge level to the story too there. Okay, and it was a short scene, very just exposition. I didn't think there was anything that interesting about it, other than Christina seemed a little bit softer than she usually is, which makes me wonder what her true motives are with Ruby. She does kind of say that whatever's going on involves her family also, um, which makes me think, well, what is the connection to her family? Because Atticus is the one with the bloodline thing. I will say that I read something in I think it's in The Guardian here, so give credit where it's due, where the writer, Ellen Jones, does have a theory, and I'll read it. And it says that Wild fan theory. Samuel Braithwaite is Letty's biological father. This would make Letty also part of the cursed bloodline. I'm basing this on Letty's dream, Christina's strange comments to Ruby, and also an episode 2 scene in which Samuel's sons of Adam pals ask why is his daughter that here. We assume he's referring to Christina, but he's looking through a magical window at Letty when he says it. So could be in that, and if that's true, Atticus and her could be like distant cousins, right? Because, well, Titus is way back in the day as far as having sex with his slave, and then Atticus's family line would go from there. In Samuel, I guess in more recent days, did he have a lover who was black? It would make sense as far as why Lita is so light skinned. And it might even make sense as far as Lita's mom, this mom that they keep talking about, and they bring up almost every episode. I'm like, man, they're bringing up this woman so much, and not the dad, that it makes me wonder if she's gonna play a key part in the story. She's dead, but she can still play a very key part in unlocking all the pieces of this puzzle. because we do know that Ruby and Lita are half sisters. That's why, Ruby is much darker than Lita is. So it makes sense as far as why they cast a light skinned woman, aside from the fact that they love, Hollywood loves to cast light skinned women over dark skinned women in these roles. But given how this is a Jordan Peele, Misha Green production, and, you know, they're in love with the Lupitas of the world, which is wonderful. Um, I'm not sure if that would be the reason why. Okay, but if you're looking at other media, it happens all the time. They will replace a dark-skinned black woman for a light-skinned black woman, like almost all the time. It's incredible, and there's a few websites and articles you can read about that, and it's not just once, twice. Once, twice, you're like, okay, but it's over and over and over and over again. But so that could be the reason for that. Okay, so uh, they Atticus and Lita, their whole thing is that Lita wakes up from this dream. She had a dream with Hannah, Atticus's ancestor. What? So she's appearing now, and it makes sense now. What is she carrying? A book. What is the book? The Book of Names. So Atticus and Lita realize, yo, the book is in my family. Somewhere, my family is connected to magic. And while Christina's looking for pages, we got the whole damn book. And the book isn't just about magic, it's about how to create these. So we got to find that. So all of a sudden, this becomes the MacGuffin of the show, which is kind of cool. Gives you a little bit of something to look for. The MacGuffin, for those that don't know, is a device. It's a device that's used in movies as far as like what's the thing that everybody's after. It's the Ark of the Covenant in the Indiana Jones movies, uh, or the plans to whatever, the Death Star. Well, that's not really a MacGuffin, but something that everybody is chasing after at the same time, like the diamond somewhere, whatever, right? So in this case, the Book of Names would become the MacGuffin if the antagonist and the protagonist are all looking for it. Who gets there first? And how does that change the story? So in also Atticus finds out that his dad's gay. Thank goodness this happened quickly. They didn't drag it out because that would just be boring. And I loved Atticus's reaction to it, and because it was not a positive reaction, it was a very negative reaction, and it's what to be expected at that time. Although we have seen scenes with Atticus in well, that first scene in the first episode where he saw the guy getting a blowjob, and he was just kind of uh, shocked, but not like, "Yo, I'm gonna beat you up." Just like, okay, not my thing. So we don't get this homophobic feel from him. But when he finds out it's his dad, then yeah, he calls him a faggot. He's very angry. And I think he's less angry about the fact that he's gay, but just the fact that his dad lied to him. His dad beat him all the time, and wanted to keep him from being soft and this. And he's like, man, he was just projecting all of his self hatred on me. So I think there's still room for reconciliation in this father son interplay, moving ahead, and it makes sense for the time, though. I know I've read some articles where people get upset with the depiction of women with that Yahima character, the way that she was killed off, or them was killed off, was killed off, and you got to understand it's set in the 1950s. Not everybody's going to be as quote unquote woke as people are now. So that's just, it is what it is, right? Now, my friend Pete, who's been watching this show, he makes a great point about it where what he likes is the idea that, or what the writers are trying to say, is that we're all kind of products of our time, including Lovecraft. The very first episode, it says, when the older lady gets upset that Atticus is reading this science fiction about some old Confederate guy who becomes like a general on Mars or something, a hero on Mars. And she's like, I couldn't read that. It's like a Confederate dude. And he says, well, characters are like people. They're flawed, and we just have to kind of accept the good that they do have. And but then she does say, well, sometimes there's way too many flaws. You know, the flaws are too strong. I can't accept somebody, which is a valid point too. But the show tries to present that in the sense that it's not trying to make it like like all white people are evil. It just happens that we haven't met any nice white people in the show. Christina's like somewhat, she's like half and half, but it's trying to portray that as, look, that was a product of the time, 1950s. That's what it was. And then with last week's episode, we saw it in reverse, I guess, in a way, right? Because now Atticus was the bad guy. He was the one killing commies and just being, torturing these people who were different. So we're not really, Pete always says, oh, we all think that if we were born at that time, we would be like Martin Luther King's and of the world and Gandhi's of the world and their allies. But probably not. I mean, if you are a white person born in the 1950s, if you weren't in all right racist or had some racist attitude, that would actually be pretty shocking, because that's what was fed to you, So it took a while for people's mentalities to change. And I say that as somebody that believes that the racists are always in the minority. If they were the majority, I don't think we would have ever moved out of certain things in our history. But even so, we all have such a lofty view of ourselves. But it's within the context of this world in which we live in today. Imagine if you were born in the 1950s or the 1850s or the 1750s, all you would know is the context of the world of that time. And it would take some time, it would take something extraordinary or just an extraordinary person to be able to move beyond that. That's why we honor people like that who can look beyond their generation, beyond the what society is feeding them. So that's a very strong theme of this show, and it's a powerful theme, and it's one that is explored heavily in this episode because of all that Hippolyta can be, or Hippolyta, and all that she isn't because of when she was born, right? Because she's genius level. She's doing all these calculations in her head. She's like going Dr. Dr. Tyson level here of just, or Catherine, right? Dr. Catherine level calculations. And she probably in the real world and even in this story probably will never get the recognition that she rightly deserves. Now, moving back to her story, so what happens is that Atticus and Lita. Oh, one last thing with Lita, we find out that maybe she's pregnant. There's a little Attica baby inside her. So, which would make sense. I mean, I don't think they're using condoms, and they are doing it a lot. But yeah, so she's probably pregnant. We'll see what that leads to. Now, back to Hippolyta. Atticus and Lita figure that, oh my God, Hippolyta discovered a way to open up this little, that little globe thing, and there's coordinates on it, and that's where she's headed, and she's probably in danger. So Atticus arrives just in time because when she's in there, these two cops come down, which seem like they're connected to that cop that had the body transfer or whatever, because his torso is like of a black man and his head is of a white guy. So they go in there, they find her. Atticus comes in, kind of does some fisticuffs, beating up people. The gun falls next to Hippolyta. She shoots one of the cops. But meanwhile, she's opened this portal to space time, and then she stands there with Atticus because she can't believe what she just did, and she gets sucked into it. And that's when the show takes a left turn, and she ends up on this planet, I guess, like a far distant planet. These two robot looking creatures come and get her. And next time we see her, she's in this white room, doesn't know who she is. And then this woman with the most massive afro ever, ever, which should be coming up in a second here on the slides. There she is. Look at that afro. That's powerful afro right there. I loved it. Um, she shows up and she says, "This is not a prison. Okay, this is not a prison. Name yourself, right?" And what she's given Hippolyta is this chance to be whatever she wants. So it goes into a similar theme that they played off of Ruby, but Ruby is seeing it from a very carnal, very um, practical level, which is valid too. Whereas here, it's a much more metaphysical level of what can you be if you have the chance to just be in your own skin, but be in your own skin in whatever situation, whatever circumstance you choose. So that's what Hippolyta is discovers after trying to escape this room and realizing she can't, and the lady just coming back and telling her this is not a prison. And when he asks her her name, she says, "I am." And that's a biblical reference, right? Because when Moses asked God his name, he just says, "I am." You know, that's, I just am. So that gets into this whole other theory of, we are gods, right? And we have God within us. If God is part of us, we are part of God, and we are connected to everything. So when the lady says, "I am," it's her way of saying, "I'm God." And you can be like God yourself and be connected to everything in the universe. And that's what Hippolyta does. Because the lady asks her, "Where do you want to be right now?" And she's like, "I want to be dancing with Josephine Baker in France." And that's where she ends up. And that's where, if you've been looking at the screen, you see some slides there of her back in France. It's pretty funny how she just ends up in the middle of one of Josephine's acts, but eventually she starts to feel comfortable there. She sees the strength of um, Josephine and being in France. And for those of you that don't know, a lot of blacks expatriated to France due to the greater level of freedom that they had in France compared to America. And this happened all the way through the 60s and beyond. Other famous people that went there, well, the most famous for me at least, Nina Simone, but I believe James Baldwin spent some time um, in France. So a lot of uh, famous black artists and musicians and thinkers went to France because it was a place where they could be free. And when I went to Paris, I felt that. I felt this acceptance of um, Black America on a different level than what I feel down here in Brazil, and definitely on a different level than what you get in America. So, totally understandable. And she realized, oh, wow, I can be free here. I've never felt this before. I can be loose. Uh, the whites had somehow put the noose around her neck and she hadn't even realized it. And I think for a lot of black Americans, this is a great lesson because you may not realize how tight the noose is around your neck until you get out of America into a different culture and you realize, oh my God, this is what it feels like to actually be free and around my people. I know a lot of black Americans feel that way when they come to Brazil and they go to Salvador, which is a mainly black state. And you're like, oh my God, I can breathe, I can be myself. Maybe white folks will never understand what that feeling is of just, you know, I can laugh as loud as I want. I can dance as loud as I want. I don't have to check my blackness, because I'm around a bunch of white people who may not be willing to, who may not understand it. Now, I think the closest, maybe if you're a woman, you can maybe understand it when you're out with your girlfriends, quote unquote, like away from the boys, where, and maybe men too. I mean, when you're out with just the boys. But that's such a part of culture already. We kind of know what it's like to be out with the boys. We got a president that talks about, grabbing women by the pussy. So it's locker room talk. It's the way guys express themselves, I think, is already part of the national consciousness. Not so much women when they're free to just talk and just be themselves. And black people in other cultures, I'm sure too, sometimes just need that space where they can just be like, whew, I can be free and not worry that if I'm laughing and dancing too loud, somebody's going to call the cops on me, right? Because these motherfuckers be calling the cops on everything. You walking with your dog and they calling the cops. You're having a picnic and they're calling the cops. So interesting feeling, great feeling that she had over in Paris. She could feel that freedom. And then from Paris, she keeps time jumping. This episode is all about doing the time warp again. For any fans of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Uh, and she ends up in a tribe. Right name here, guys, because I had it open. And the Benin's fearless female warriors, the Dahomey Amazons, which is what I believe that they're trying to depict here. And it's these women that bravely fought against the French and were written about by the French in the English, as far as these ferocious Amazonian women. And it's interesting that her name is Hippolyta, and I mentioned that in, I think, the first or second episode, because that connects to Wonder Woman mythology, right? Because Hippolyta is the mom, Diana is the daughter. So that makes me wonder what they have in store for Diana. And if you can see in one of the slides I got going here in the slideshow, Hippolyta definitely wears that. She definitely wears the. There you go. Looking straight out of Wonder Woman, but like the real Wonder Woman, right? Real life Wonder Woman, warrior type. So that's kind of cool that they made her. They had a scene with her as a warrior, and man, what a great acting job, right? Because she just goes from that tightness, that she had been talking about for so long, that just being tight, tight, tight the whole time. Um, and we get to see a whole different side of her. From dancer, and she's smiling. This was like her coming out episode, similar to Montrose, right? When he came out the last episode, just that here it's even uh, brighter and louder, and this is New Ellis. I just want to make sure I give her credit. New Ellis would be the actress who plays Hyppolyta. And you just get, her smile is radiant. We get to see it for real because she's just such a beaten down woman. So one wonders what Hippolyta will be when she comes back. And then she eventually she decides that I am Hippolyta, George's wife. And we get to see Uncle George again for a little scene, which is nice. A little callback. In some alternate universe, he is still alive, and she explains everything to him. And he says, wow, I can't believe after all of that, you chose to be my wife. You chose to be Hippolyta, George's wife. And that's where she steps back and she's like, you got to understand, I love being your wife, but I've made myself small in order to accommodate that, you know? And he understands her and he says, you have to be as big as you want to be. I'm not going to stand in the way. So it's great that he's understanding of that. He was understanding of that in the first episode, right, of the series, and it would have been great to have seen that evolve in the series, but it was cool to see it in the scene that just because you're a woman and you're married, and that's such an important message for women, I suppose, because some women feel like marriage is a death trap, and that's because the men in their life make them feel that way. And a real man is confident enough in himself where he can let his woman do whatever she wants to do. So if she really likes to cook and keep the house neat, good for her. But if she happens to at the same time cook, keep the house neat, and run a company on her own, wonderful, right? What's holding you back? Or maybe she just wants to run the company and he can clean the house. Or maybe she just likes to clean the house and cook because that's just what she wants to do. She wants to be pampered. Great. There's many options. Just like men can have many options, guess what? Women can have many options of on how they can run their lives. So I think that was a message that I got from this. And it was cool that she, despite all this independence that she got, she still realized that she loved this man and she liked to be with this man. But she needed more to be more. Okay. And he understood that, which is really beautiful. And when and then the next scene is really great because then she's realized she's like, I'm Hippolyta the Discoverer, and then she's able to transfer whatever, she's got this little thing on her wrist that kind of has some magical whatever. I guess it's not magic anymore. Although, what is it? Was it Arthur C. Clarke that said, or I forgot who the sci-fi writer was that said that any sufficiently advanced technology would probably be considered magic, right? Any sufficiently advanced. Let me get the right quote because it's such a good quote and I want to credit the right person. Yes, this is Arthur C. Clarke in his three laws of sci-fi, of science. Uh, it says, one, when a distinguished but elderly scientist states that something is possible, he is almost certainly right. When he states that something is impossible, he is very probably wrong. Two, the only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture a little way past them into the impossible. And three, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So that's a famous quote, right? And that's kind of what it felt like. It was like space magic, but I guess it was just as advanced technology that they were using. And well, speaking of Arthur C. Clarke, there was kind of a 2001 feel to this because we know that in 2001 they have to unlock the mysteries. I'm talking about the movie. I've never read the book. Sorry, guys. But in the movie, but I know he was a consultant in the movie, so I imagine it's somewhat similar. Every step of the way back from like prehistory, uh, up to when man began to explore space and they found that monolith on the moon. Um, it's been like this: unlock the pieces, unlock the pieces. If you are able to unlock the pieces, then we can give you access to this other information, this other knowledge, which is what the main character does at the end. He's able to find this other knowledge all the way out on the other side of the universe. And he's kept, I mean, it's basically the same idea as this. He's kept in this holding room, which is not a prison, I imagine, and eventually turns into like the Star Child. But, he's like one with the universe. So he's evolved to whatever the greatest level of evolution is. And Hippolyta's given that chance. And she says, "Hey, Diana's gonna be by herself." You know, she's weighing it in her mind, so she makes the choice to go back. Thing is, after she makes that choice, Atticus is the one that pops out of the time warp thing, space time breach. He looks, he sees the cop is still there. He tries to get any evidence that Hippolyta was there, including a copy of Lovecraft Country. Did anybody notice that? He picked up a copy of Lovecraft Country, and then he runs, except that he left the comic book that has Diana's name on it. Oh no. So I guess they're gonna find out who was behind the killing of these cops. Thing is though, where's Hippolyta? She definitely made the choice to go back because I read a review. I think it was in the AV Club where they're like, "Well, she decided to just." They said, "Oh, well, I guess Diana is gonna stay an orphan." And it was either the AV Club or the Guardian. I can't remember now, so forgive me if I'm crediting the wrong source. But the review said, "Well, I guess Diana is gonna be an orphan now because Hippolyta decided to stay out in space." But I'm not sure because she did say she wanted to go back. It's just she didn't show up. And did I mention, by the way, it's getting late, that when she said I'm the explorer, I think I went through all this thread and I didn't finish the thread, which is George went with her and they actually went into Diana's um, imaginary world, like the comic book that she was writing, where they're out exploring space. So that was really cute. And it makes me wonder if this is not a way that she can bring George back. Would it really be George? But a version of him that feels real, and he seemed like to be the same understanding kind of guy from the original George. So I don't know, uh, but that's kind of left hanging because watch the next episode. I would imagine. Um, but yeah, she definitely didn't step back. So she went back, but where did she go back? That's the question. Which home is she going back to? Those are the big questions. Some other stuff in this episode that was interesting. Another call back, historical callback. Okay, we did have the Amazonians of Bazine, and we had this lovely lady, and of course, just as I'm about to talk about her, I turn off my phone so I can't see my notes because I'm horrible with names. But Hippolyta waves to a black female motorcyclist who passes her on the road. This is from The Guardian. This can only be Bessie Stringfield, a total trailblazer who, among many incredible feats, crossed the US alone on her bike in 1930 when most roads were dirt tracks and she was just 19. She was also known to enjoy inventing stories about her past, or to put it another way, she often asserted the right to say, I am what I am. Um, but later on, she became the first black woman to actually touch all 48 states. Okay. Well, I say all 48, meaning continental United States, right? Minus Alaska and Hawaii. Um, and there's a few other callbacks to theoretical physicists and, these multi universe theories. So it's yeah, there's stuff like that. We got Josephine Baker, which is a famous historical figure. So I like that they added these little touches in there of showing these female trailblazers, these females who were independent, or these women that were independent, I should say. Yeah, and by the way, guys, ugh, people that call women females, horrible. I said females because I had just used it as an adjective, which then I think it's okay, like a female scientist, a female this. Um, but yeah, guys, stop calling women females. That's like as base as you can get, right? Or expect them to call you males back. I'm going out with my mail. Okay, like what? My email or my so that's pretty stupid. So nice callbacks. Interesting episode. I mean, I liked it a lot. I can't say it moved me. I mean, last week's episode I thought was very mature. This week's episode is a lot is was very mature too. Um, it was interesting that I mean they spent a whole chunk of the episode just on Hippolyta. I don't want to get to a position where they're like letting the rest of the story move at slug space just so we can focus on one story. I mentioned that a couple weeks ago where that's where Lost sometimes would get lost along the way because they would spend the chunk of the episode was telling the flashback story, which oftentimes would be great. Sometimes they would, have a few misses, and then it would be in between. It would be spliced between what would be considered 5 minutes of exposition, of real time exposition for the character, where meanwhile we get like you know all this backstory, which is great. I mean, great character piece. It shows us more about the character. This episode shows us a whole lot about the character, but I do want the plot to move along too. Okay, so when we get episodes like that, it can be a little bit frustrating because it's like let's move the plot along, or maybe there isn't that much plot to tell. So we're gonna take these detours into let's find out about our characters, Ville. So far, though, I mean, it's a young show, so it's important to do that because these touches will certainly be important in the future when we see some decisions that Hippolyta will inevitably make. I hope she continues to be the strong woman that she realizes that she is, and that helps her in her fight against the evil magicians out there. Um, and by the way, Josephine Baker was a Freemason. So there's that. So, guys, that's about it for this episode of the Lovecraft Country review. Sorry for taking a bit longer than usual to put it out. Some of the Lovecraft groups only allow spoilers after Tuesday anyway, so I'll post this tomorrow morning and hopefully you'll watch it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, which I should have said at the beginning, but I suck. Thank you, everybody that's been watching these videos, which I also should have said at the beginning, but I suck. So if you've made it this far, you are awesome. And just thanks for the views. I mean, I keep getting a nice steady stream of viewers. I don't know any of you guys, so it's like 40 strangers or 50 strangers sometimes that I don't know. So that's a good feeling. It's an awesome feeling. Tell your friends I'm here. Usually, I mean, if I don't have internet issues, I put these out around 12:30 a.m. on a Sunday, my time, which would be around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US. So if you do want to, by some off chance, catch me online, that's when I would be online. But hey, these episodes don't always come out when they need to come out, guys. I'm trying to keep my methods of watching a little bit of a secret. Um, but let's just say I can't afford HBO down here in Brazil. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Make sure to catch what we're watching. That's on Mondays. I just posted a video. We talked about a few really fun movies. And we did. I just did an aliens podcast on Sunday too with my friend. So my friend Peter. So look out for that coming to your screens shortly.